Hello my friends. Welcome to the calming sleepy story. My name is Brian. I am an English storyteller. Today, I share with you a horror story named The Ghost Train of Appalachia, and I hope you enjoy it a lot with deep sleeping. Let's get started. The Ghost Train of Appalachia. The Screaming Engine. The wind in the Appalachian hollows carries many sounds, rustling branches, hooting owls, and the whispered names of the dead. But once in a great while, it carries something stranger. The locals say that on certain nights, especially when the fog hangs thick over the old rails, you can hear the screech of wheels long rusted, a thunderous engine that no longer runs. They call it the Screaming Engine. It vanished over a century ago, swallowed by the mountain without a trace. But it still howls, they say. Still searches. Still calls for passengers it never delivered. And some say it still runs on time. The Last Stop. Appalachian Mountains, Virginia, Autumn, 1891. Elias Finch stood alone at the edge of the derelict Pine Hollow station, staring at rusted tracks that vanished into mist. He held his lantern high, casting orange light across the crumbling platform and rotted signs swaying above, Pine Hollow, EST 1856. He hadn't planned to return. Not after what happened to his brother. But when the letter came, signed only, conductor, and bearing the long-defunct seal of the Appalachian Central Railway, he had no choice. It said, "Your brother Thomas is alive. He's waiting at Pine Hollow. You must come at midnight. Bring no one." Thomas had vanished 11 years ago, working as an engineer aboard the ACR No. 187, a train lost in a mysterious derailment. The company blamed sabotage. Some said landslide. Others whispered it wasn't the mountain that took them, but something inside it. Elias had searched back then. Trudged every path, bribed railway men, even begged a preacher to hold a séance. Nothing. Not even bones. And now, this letter. He checked his watch. 11:57 p.m. The mist thickened. The cold grew sharp. Then, a low rumble echoed down the line. Faint at first, then louder. Rhythmic. Metallic. Chuff chuff, chuff chuff. Elias froze. The wind dropped dead. Then the scream. A piercing whistle tore through the fog, neither mechanical nor human. The very ground shook as a train that should not exist burst from the mists. Its lanterns glowed a sickly green. Its frame, twisted iron and blackened steel, steamed as if pulled from the underworld. At the helm, a silhouette in a conductor's cap. No face, just darkness where eyes should be. The train shrieked to a halt at Pine Hollow. A door creaked open. And from inside, Thomas stepped out, unchanged, untouched by age, wearing the same coat he wore the day he vanished. "Elias," he said softly. "You made it." Elias' mouth went dry. "You're alive." Thomas smiled. "More or less." The whistle blew again. "You coming?" "A ticket to the unknown." Elias hesitated. The mist swirled around his boots like grasping hands. The train loomed before him, impossibly solid yet exuding an unnatural shimmer, like moonlight on disturbed water. Thomas stood at the open door, one foot still inside the train. His smile never wavered, but there was a dullness behind his eyes, like someone smiling through a locked window. "I thought you were dead," Elias whispered. "I was," Thomas replied. "Or maybe I wasn't. Time is different now." Elias looked past him into the train car. The interior flickered with dim green gaslight. Velvet seats, brass fixtures. Everything gleamed like it was still 1891, but somehow, not. The air hummed like electricity mixed with breath. "You coming?" Thomas asked again. Elias should have run. Every bone in his body screamed to turn and flee back into the woods, to forget he ever saw this thing. But he stepped forward. "Do I need a ticket?" he muttered, mostly out of reflex. Thomas chuckled. "Oh, you've already paid." Before Elias could ask what that meant, the door hissed shut behind him. Inside, the train was warm, oppressively so. The lights swayed as though the car were breathing. Elias looked back, but the windows showed only endless blackness. "Where is this going?" Elias asked, his voice small. "Not far," Thomas replied, walking down the aisle. "Just down the line. You'll see." As they passed through the car, Elias noticed the passengers. They sat perfectly still in their seats, dressed in suits and bonnets, Sunday best from decades past. But none of them moved. None blinked. Some were mere skeletons dressed in clothing untouched by dust. Others weren't quite human at all. Elias's stomach churned. "Thomas, what is this place?" His brother stopped and turned slowly. "The ghost line," he said. "We carry those who were never meant to die, or those who never truly did." The manifest. They reached the end of the first car. Thomas opened the door to the next, and Elias caught a glimpse of something enormous shifting in the gap between the cars, something that looked like an eye, wide and blinking, tucked beneath the train. The next car was darker. Older. The walls were carved with strange runes and symbols that pulsed faintly red when Elias passed them. In the center of the car stood a long brass podium with a tattered black book resting atop it. Thomas gestured to it. "This is the manifest," he said. "Everyone on this train has a name in here. Even you." Elias approached the book. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, but the ink was fresh, almost wet. He flipped through until he reached a section marked "Returning Passengers." There, in elegant calligraphy: "Finch, Elias, one-way passage. Price paid in blood." His hands trembled. "I didn't pay anything." Thomas looked down. "You did. The day I went missing." Elias remembered. The accident. The fight. The broken axle. The way he ignored the warning letter and told Thomas to drive the engine anyway. "The train derailed because of me," Elias whispered. Thomas nodded. "And this is penance." Elias shut the book. "Then take me to the end of the line," he said. "Let's finish this." The train shuddered, and the whistle shrieked again, only now, it sounded angry. Outside, the darkness peeled back to reveal a cavern of jagged rock and glowing veins of molten ore, the heart of the mountain itself. And there, something waited. The thing in the tunnel. The train groaned as it entered the mountain. Walls of slick black stone pressed close on either side, etched with markings that pulsed red with every passing second. Sparks danced from the iron wheels below, lighting twisted faces in the rock, faces screaming silently, trapped in eternal terror. Elias sat opposite Thomas now, both men locked in silence. "Where are we?" Elias finally asked. Thomas answered without turning his head. "Where the line ends. Where all unfinished things come to rest." Outside the window, the tunnel widened into a vast chamber, an underground cathedral of natural stone. At its center, a bottomless pit breathed steam and embers into the air. The tracks curved downward and spiraled around it like a serpent coiling into the abyss. Something moved far below. Not on the tracks, but beneath them. Huge. Heavy. Crawling. A limb of coal-black sinew scraped the tunnel wall, followed by another. It had no shape, only motion. An ancient thing, coiled in shadow. Elias felt its thoughts pressing into his own, images of fire, of teeth, of roaring engines carrying screaming souls. The train began to slow. A guttural, grinding voice, not spoken but felt, filled the car. "Who rides without a name?" Elias gripped the velvet seat arm tightly. What was that? Thomas stood. The thing beneath. The first conductor. It built these tunnels before man ever struck steel. The voice came again. Who owes a debt of blood? Thomas turned to Elias, eyes wide and glistening. You must answer. I don't know what it means. Thomas stepped aside, and the brass book, the manifest, rose from its podium and floated into the air. Pages turned on their own. The book opened to Elias's name. Below it, new lines scrawled themselves. Violation, negligence. Cost, 32 souls lost in fire and derailment. Sentence, 1 soul, willingly surrendered. The train stopped. Elias heard footsteps in the next car, slow, echoing. Something approached. The door creaked open. And in stepped a man with no face, wearing a conductor's cap. His uniform was soaked in ash and soot. Where his eyes should have been were 2 burning red coals. He lifted a gloved hand and pointed at Elias. Thomas turned to his brother. It has to be you, he said quietly. Only a living man can end it. The faceless conductor extended a ticket. It smoldered at the edges. Elias took it. The moment he touched it, the pit outside the window began to glow brighter, as if it knew. The final ride had begun. The furnace below. The train lurched forward again, its wheels shrieking in protest as it began the final descent. The track coiled downward into the infernal pit like a spiral staircase. Sparks shot from the wheels, illuminating the faces in the stone, now moving, mouths opening, eyes wide in terror, as though the mountain itself were screaming. The faceless conductor remained in the car, standing sentinel at the rear, silent and unmoving. Elias clutched the burning ticket. The text on it changed with each glance. First it read, "One soul, redeemed." Then, "One soul, reclaimed." And then, "One soul, consumed." He turned to Thomas. "Is this the only way?" Thomas looked at him with grief and love tangled behind his expression. "There are no second chances. Just final ones." They entered the final chamber. The train emerged onto a long, narrow bridge of tracks suspended over an endless pit of molten fire. Below, something writhed, a titanic being of shadow and smoke, tangled in chains of molten iron, its body the size of a city. It had no face, but its form was vaguely humanoid, a monstrous parody of man and machine. The conductor. The true one. As the train slowed, the thing stirred. An arm the width of a mountain lifted toward them. Chains clinked and snapped in echo. From its chest, a massive, ribbed cavity yawned open like a furnace, breathing smoke, bone dust, and embers. The train rolled to a halt at the very edge of that cavity. The faceless conductor gestured silently to the door. "This is the price," Thomas said. "You take their place, willingly, and the others can move on. Their souls are still on board." Elias looked back through the cars. He now saw the passengers more clearly. Some were children. Old women. Workers in miners' gear. People he remembered from the accident, the ones who died when the train derailed. Their eyes were open now, watching him. Waiting. Elias stepped forward. "If I go in, what happens to me?" Thomas shook his head. "No one knows. But it will stop. The train will stop. The howling will end." The faceless conductor raised one hand and pulled a lever by the door. The furnace below gaped wider. The air grew impossibly hot. Elias looked at his brother one last time. "Tell Mama I tried." Thomas reached out, but Elias was already stepping through the doorway. He descended the steps into the furnace. Each footstep burned his boots. The chains rattled louder. The shadows of the dead leaned from the walls, whispering in his ears. His skin blistered. The ticket in his hand caught fire, and yet he walked. And when he reached the mouth of the infernal thing, Elias Finch turned and faced the train. He smiled. The faceless conductor tipped his hat. And Elias jumped. The last whistle. The moment Elias vanished into the burning heart of the conductor, the furnace let out a terrible sound, not a roar, but a long, echoing train whistle, like the cry of a dying god. The rails trembled. The mountain shook. Cracks split the ceiling of the cavern, and red light poured down like blood from heaven. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the rumble stopped. Silence fell. Inside the train, the gaslights flickered, then steadied. The unnatural warmth that clung to everything faded into a soft, deathless chill. The faceless conductor stepped back, and the great brass book, the manifest, snapped shut on its own. Somewhere deep in the engine, the gears locked with a metallic sigh. From the rear cars, a sound began to rise, soft at first, then growing in strength. Breathing. Whispering. Weeping. The passengers stirred. A woman clutched her child tighter. A miner opened his hands and looked at his calloused palms. The old woman near the end crossed herself. Their eyes cleared, no longer ghostly white, but fully human. Alive. Their time here was over. Thomas stood alone in the corridor, watching them pass him as they stepped off the train, one by one, onto a platform that hadn't been there before. A moonlit station carved from stone. Its sign simply read, "Last stop, peaceful rest." As the last soul stepped into the fog beyond, Thomas felt the weight that had held his own spirit loosen. The faceless conductor tipped his cap once more. Then he turned and walked the length of the train, fading as he went. Thomas followed him through the final door. There, in the conductor's car, he found Elias's lantern, still burning. Inside it, a single glowing coal pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. He placed a hand on the lantern. "Thank you," he whispered. Appalachian stillness. Back in the modern world, the mountains were silent again. The locals still talk about the old ghost train, the one that only runs during the blood moon, when fog blankets the hollers and the air smells faintly of soot. But the howls? They stopped that night. Loggers found Elias Finch's journal near the old rails, pages singed, but intact. It told of guilt, of loss, and a final sacrifice deep within the black hollow pass. No one could explain the molten iron rivets found scattered near the collapsed tunnel. Or why the rails were warped outward, as if something immense had once passed. They rebuilt the woods over time. The mine never reopened. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right through the trees, the whistle can still be heard, not crying, not screaming, but gentle. As if saying goodbye. Forever. Ends for today. Please subscribe for more scary horror stories.